Hey everyone, it's Chris from Lion Punch Forge. Today I've got the video that I have promised where I take some little beach or river rocks and set a stone in them and turn them into a pendant. If you're following along on my Instagram, you may have seen a pendant that I set a Montana sapphire in from a beach rock that I collected on a little family trip. I think this is a really cool technique that you don't see very much on YouTube, where you take a stone, drill a hole in it, put a tube in it, and then set a stone in that tube. Today we're going to go over kind of the basic technique of how I do it. I'm sure there are a lot of other ways to do this. The technique that I'm using is using little diamond burrs to drill holes into rocks. The same technique could be applicable to drilling a hole in an antler, drilling a hole in a piece of wood, or anything else that you want to add a stone setting into. So I'm going to get right into the basics of how I'm doing it, and we'll talk about the tools first, specifically the tools that we use to drill into the rock. But before I do, I want to remind you that if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. Liking or adding a comment definitely helps the YouTube algorithm, and it helps me keep on creating videos. So if you like this kind of stuff, add a like, maybe a subscribe, see what happens. I appreciate you. In order for us to drill into these little guys, I'm going to use some diamond centered burrs. Little tiny diamond encrusted into them. Usually they're like electroplated onto it. These ones are very inexpensive, I think from Amazon. The diamond on there is rated usually about 100 grit or so for these. You can buy some finer ones if you want to refine the hole a little bit more. So we're going to use these. First thing we're going to need to do though is figure out exactly what size tube setting that we're going to be wanting to be putting in based on the size of stone that we're going to be using in the tube setting. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to be using these Montana sapphires. I currently have a bunch of them on the website right now. They are about 2.8 to about 3 millimeters in diameter. So I'm going to make sure that the tube that I'm going to use allows me for some room to be able to drill into the end of it and set that stone. So in order to do that, I want heavy wall tubing. For this, I've selected some fine silver heavy walled tubing. I got this from Rio. The internal dimension of this tube is less than the diameter of my stone. So 2.37 millimeters. And the wall thickness is about 0.85 millimeters, with the total tube diameter being about 3.5. So what that allows me to do is to take a setting burr, drive it into there to create a seat for that stone, and then burnish the edge of the fine silver around the top of the stone to set it. So now that I know that my external dimension of the tube that I'm going to want to be drilling a hole for is about 3.5 millimeters, I'm going to want to select a couple of these burrs. They're going to progressively allow me to drill that hole up to about 3.5 millimeters. These are the burrs that I selected for the drilling process. There's some small ones and some larger progressive ones. For drilling a hole in rock, I'm going to really want to do a progressive drilling, meaning that I'm going to do a small hole and then progressively make that hole larger using these larger burrs. It's definitely going to go easier because there's going to be less resistance on the smaller burrs and then less resistance as the larger burrs drill through that smaller hole. And it allows me to start that pilot hole right where I want it. The largest diameter burr that I have here is, you can see, about 3.3, but as we knew, we wanted about 3.5, which means as I get this one done, I can add a little bit of wiggle to it as I'm burring it out to bring my total dimension up to about 3.5. So you may not be able to find the exact burr you need, but you can find one slightly smaller usually, and then just waller it out. But you want to make sure you go slow, and I'll show you how I do that. Next, we're going to talk about rock selection. So I don't want super heavy rocks as a necklace. If it's a ring or something like that, you want to figure out whether or not it's going to be the right size for a ring. But for me, I want a nice and light necklace because this is going to be for my daughter. And thickness wise, I've found that around 5 or 6 millimeters is about right. It's about 6. But she has smaller build, so these two rocks I really like. This one's a little thinner. It's about 4.2 mil, and sometimes these will crack, these smaller ones, when you're drilling the hole and then kind of riveting the tube over. So I'm going to select this guy here. It looks like a good candidate for that, and like I said before, it's right around 6 millimeters. So we'll select him, and then now that we know which rock we're going to pick, we're going to drill it. So for this process, I'm going to use a flex shaft. You can see my diamond bit from the other day is still in there. And I'm going to install my small one first. I'm going to be drilling 2 holes in this. One of them is going to be for the bale. The other is going to be for the stone setting. The bale is going to be less critical than the stone setting one, so I'm going to be a little faster with that one, and I'll take my time on the other. So first thing I'm going to need to do, anytime I'm drilling stone, I want to make sure that I use water for a couple of reasons. One, it keeps the rock nice and cool, and 2, you want to keep rock dust down. One of the things that I see some people doing is they'll grind rock and not use water. They'll have a bunch of dust flying around. That dust, over time, can cause a respiratory illness called silicosis. It's basically the silicon in the rock gets into your lungs, and it can cause all sorts of nasty problems. So when you are drilling on rock, make sure you absolutely use water for the lubricant, for the keeping it cool, and to protect your lungs. So we're going to get this rock wet, and I'm going to do a combination of drilling it by hand and then placing it down and putting my flex shaft on top. So this part may not be real great image-wise, but you'll get an idea of what we're doing. I'm going to drill my bale first. I'm just going to use the flex shaft to kind of locate it. There we go. And I'm just going to locate that bale hole first. See the dust starting to form? That means it's time for me to get it wet again. Locate my hole. See dust coming out. Time to get it wet. Now that I have the hole started, I'm going to take my flex shaft and I'm going to use the pressure, downward pressure of drilling it. I'll wait for the dust, or if the rock starts to get hot, just add a little more water. This part can be a little messy, but that's okay. This particular rock is basalt, so it's hard, but not super hard. If you're drilling agate, this is going to go a lot slower because agate is a lot harder. Okay, so I've changed out my bit a couple times here, and I noticed the backside came through a little off. Didn't go straight through. Sometimes that happens because rocks have different hardnesses all the way through them sometimes. And so we're going to even up that hole a little bit. So there's one side, there's the other, and we're just going to even it up. Okay, so we have our hole in the center of the rock. Now when I put my jump ring on here, jump ring is going to be round, and this goes straight through, and the roundness of the internal dimension of that jump ring is going to hit the edges of this hole. So I'm going to take my burr and I'm just going to relieve those edges a little bit. I'll take some close-ups here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to relieve the inside here a little bit. both sides. So that jump ring's internal dimension will go all the way through that rock. And then we can drill our hole for the stone setting. And remember, we're going to stay between about right around 3.5 millimeters for the center of that hole. We'll do the same thing, make sure the rock's wet, and then I'm going to start the hole about where I want it. Start lifting up my burr upright, and then I can start drilling the hole. Now this burr that I have on it right now is way undersized. I'll take a measurement for you. Turn it on here. This one is 2.4 millimeters. So I can go all the way through the rock with this burr and not be anywhere close to my 3.5. And that's what I'm probably going to end up doing here. Start to dry out. You can see the holes dry. And add water. Keep going. Okay, so we've gone through one side and the other. Now we're going to start elongating that hole. And so I'll use this little bud burr to do the next progression. This bud burr is about 3.1 millimeters in diameter. So it gets us really close to where we want to be. Go through one side and then I'll go through the other. Sometimes that helps you when it comes to breaking out one side. If I go through one side and then go through the other. And so now I have a little bit larger hole. And now it's time for me to start elongating that. And I'm going to do the next cylindrical burr, which is this guy. And he is, let's see, about 3.17, so just slightly larger than the other one. And what that's going to do is just get me really close to where I want to be, where I have to start wallering that out. We'll go nice and slow. Okay, I'm through. Both sides. And now that largest burr, which is just undersized to what we want, and then we'll start kind of giving a little bit of wallering. Let's see how much. Just to remind us, we're 3.3. So if I wiggle this a little bit, it gets us really close to that 3.5 we want. So I don't need to do much. And what I'm going to start doing once I go through this is grab a tube and start doing test fitting of that tube. So here's our rock, here's our tube. It goes in there it goes right into the opening and won't push in any farther. So I'm going to want to slightly elongate the internal dimension of that hole. So remember, it doesn't take much for us to get to 3.5. And now we are right in there. It's really okay on this side. It's the other side that it's starting to catch on. So I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to do the same thing. Open that up a little more. Just drawing it in and out. Now our tube goes all the way in. Here we go. We've got a rock with a tube hole in it, and it's nice and tight. The rock will rotate, but we're going to tighten that up a little bit, and I'll show you kind of two different ways. First way, which I'm going to do, requires one extra step. The other way is something that may work well for you, is just epoxying that tube into the rock. I hate it because I have to clean up epoxy, and it's just not my most favorite thing in the world. So I'm going to take one of these cone burrs and I'm going to elongate the outer edge of my hole a little bit so that I can basically rivet that tube into the rock. So let me change my burr out. So you may have noticed it while I was running the video, but I only drilled through one side. The other side didn't go all the way through. I used the wrong hole, which is cool because I can just drill through this other hole to create my bale hole, or I can keep my bale nice and big like this. I'm going to put the tube in this one though, so I'm going to off camera drill this one through and then add that chamfering like I had showed you before. So that'll get me all caught up, and then we can talk about the next step. Okay, so that was a Bob Ross happy little accident, but we're making art and it's okay. So here's our rock with the two holes. One of them will be my bale, the other will be my tube. And so I'm gonna pick the topmost that has the least amount of extra material to be my bale, because I'd like to have the other one to have a little bit more strength for my rivet. And since I'm adding a little rivet in there, it makes sense to have a little extra material. These rocks do break occasionally. If it breaks while I'm making this, I'm just going to drill out another rock and I'm going to continue on with the process to show you. Just know that this process, sometimes there's a crack or a fissure inside the rock that gives way, it's loose, maybe the rock is too soft that you chose, all sorts of other fun things. But it makes its way to other techniques like this, which is a Montana agate with a Montana sapphire set in it using this same technique. You can use the same technique for antler, other soft stone, wood. So just know that this isn't just two rocks, all sorts of other material. So now what we're gonna need to do is select a rivet. And to do that, we're gonna grab our calipers again. And we're gonna measure the rock thickness. This one, you can see 5.9, about 6 millimeters. So I'm gonna cut a piece of tubing that is about 6.1 millimeters. That's gonna give me a little bit of room for me able to rivet it over. Okay, zero these out, maybe 6.1-ish. And I'm going to lock them down. Then I'm going to mark my tube. All the way around. I have a little tiny hash mark on that. All the way around the tube at 6.1 millimeters. And then now I'm going to saw. So one way you can do this is to just make tiny cuts as you rotate the tube. For this one, I'm just going to go straight through. Rotate it slightly in that cut. Make it hold on. And if I drop it, make sure I see where it goes. Otherwise, I have to cut another tube. Okay, so now I'm going to insert my tube into the rock. If you're doing the epoxy method, you can insert a little epoxy inside the rock first and then slide the tube in, let it dry, and then clean it up. But we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way, where we rivet it into the rock and expand it so that it won't fall out. And to do that, we're going to use dapping punches. So let's head over to the vise and I'll show you how I use that. As you can imagine, this particular part of the operation is sensitive, and this is the point in which you could potentially break the stone. I've picked a dapping punch that fits inside of that tubing because the outside portion of this dapping punch is tapered. And as I put this tube onto there and make sure I'm aligned right, I'll take my other dapping punch and put him on top to start flaring. And so by doing this, I'm going to start just lightly tapping. I'll make sure that I keep that tube in place. Once I get the tube kind of flared, then I'm going to be right where I want to. This part, though, is a little precarious. Let's flip it around. My tube is still free floating in there. I'll tap a little harder. Now I have my tube flared out on there. Now I just need to clean it up a little. Okay, if I'm a little bit long on one of my rivets, this side I'm not, this side I am, I'm going to carefully file that down. You might want to use not one of your good files, but one of your old files for this. And now I have a flush rivet on the setting side. So now comes the fun part. Not screwing up the setting. Okay, so I'm not using calibrated stones. These guys are between about 2.8 and 3 mil. And I'm going to pick one I like based on kind of the color. They're all nice and bright, but I see one particularly that I like. This guy here. So I'm going to put these guys away so I don't spill them. And then I'm going to eventually put this guy in one of my bench trays here. I make these 3D printed, they stack, and I can stick my stone in there so I don't knock it off somewhere. But the first thing I'm going to do is figure out what size burrs I need, and to do that I'm going to take measurement of the stone. Put it on its top, which is called the crown, and then I'm going to open these up, zero them out, and I'll measure the diameter of the girdle, which is about 2.9 millimeters. And now I know that my burrs maximum size is about 2.9 millimeters, and we'll start burring that out. That's the fun part. Okay, I use two types of burrs for this operation. One is a setting burr, the other, which is this one. Sorry, looking through a camera. Kind of looks like a flat wall with a cone on it, like a top and bottom, or the girdle and the bottom of the stone, the culet. And then the flame burr, which is kind of looks like a little flame. They're both 2.9 millimeters, and I'm going to start with the flame burr by elongating this hole a little bit. These setting burrs don't always like to cut well, so I'm going to remove the majority of the material with the flame burr. You can also use a round burr if you have one of those, ball burr. So we'll start with that first. I'm going to add a little bit of lubricant, which I use my burr and blade balm, which is a natural lubricant made by a friend of mine who does beauty products. And I'm going to just take that and remove majority of the material. Now the major diameter of this burr is the largest diameter, and I'm going to go down right about that larger diameter. That looks good. Now I'm going to go to the setting burr. I'm going to try and get you a close-up of what this looks like before I move to the next burr. The interior of that hole has the exterior shape of that flame burr. Now the setting burr is going to straighten those walls out. Rather than being rounded, they'll be nice and flat. And this is where I have to be really careful. There's my setting burr. Really careful not to go too deep. I'm going to want to cut a little bit, test my stone, cut a little bit, test my stone, and go nice and slow. Okay, see the stone there? Top of the stone is below the surface of the tube setting, and it's ready for me to burnish over. I'm going to try and get a close-up of what that looks like, but obviously it's going to be really hard without a fingers not in the way. But we'll do one part of the process and then kind of show you what it looks like. Right now you can kind of see that the edges of that bezel are straight up and down. The burnisher, what that's going to do is bring the edges of that tube setting and round them over the top of the stone to keep it nice and still. It doesn't come out. So the burnisher I'm going to use is this guy, and I'm working on actually making and selling these. A little tiny burnishing tool like this. What you're going to see me do is take this burnisher around the outside of the stone, pushing against the metal, not on the stone, but pushing against the metal, and this rounded shape of the burnisher is going to push the metal from the tube setting down over the top of the stone to secure it in place. So let's try and get that on film, and we'll see what we can do. But once it's done, that stone's not going anywhere. Okay, this is about as close as I can get. I'm going to try and get my fingers in here without disturbing too much. I'm going to look through the microscope here, try and get the stone centered. May not be able to focus too great on this, but I'm going to take the burnisher around the outside of the stone here, just like this, and I'm going to start pushing that bezel onto the stone, and it should start stopping it to wiggle in here in a minute. Getting there. Okay, so the stone is set. I'm going to clean up the outside of that bezel a little bit by giving it maybe some texture, and I'm going to do that with an engraver. So I'm going to use my GRS Engraver Mach AT to add a little bit of hammer texture to the outside of that bezel to kind of spread it out a little bit and to make it look nice and bright. The texture I'm going to use will probably mimic the rock too, so it'll blend in really nice. Let's do that now. So it's this handmade texture tool that I made. It's just an old burr that I slapped on the tip of it on a diamond stone to add a little bit of kind of gritty texture. Makes it look like a rock, and yeah, it should add some fun texture to that. So let's get you on video showing you how to do that. Alright, so let's add a little bit of texture. can take that burnisher on the outside to kind of brighten it up. There we go. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is add our jump ring on here. And to do that, I've already cut some jump rings. Unless you guys really want to see me cut more jump rings, I could do that, maybe in another video. These ones are 16 gauge round, and I used a mandrel, I think 6 millimeters is what I ended up using. I want to be able to go through that hole and have some space. So what I'm going to end up doing is opening up these jump rings so I can feed it through the top of the rock here. And then we're going to solder it closed while it's on the rock. That'll be fun. To do that, we're going to grab some pliers. We're going to close it like we would close any other jump ring. So we'll grab the jump ring and our pliers, we'll move it back and forth to get it nice and tight, and then I'm going to wedge a piece of solder between the two joints so that it's right where I want it and I don't have it flowing somewhere I don't want it to go. So here we go, our jump ring is now on the pendant. We're going to solder this on place on the rock. If I'm nice and quick and efficient with my heat, I shouldn't need to worry about this guy heating up and potentially breaking. So if you have good heat control, this is definitely something you can do depending on the kind of rock that you're doing it with. Otherwise, you could use a welder. Otherwise, you use an open jump ring or find another way to create a bail. So this one though, we're going to wedge a piece of solder between those two joints, and then I'll bring you over to the solder station, solder it up. Once we're soldered up, we're going to take a pair of parallel jaws and squish it so that this round jump ring is now a little bit more oval, acts as a little bit more of a bail shape, and we're going to lock that solder joint in between the rock and everything else, so the solder joint's not going to show anyway. So let's get that piece of solder wedged in there. Okay, with that jump ring on there, I'm going to use a technique with some Wober's Pro-Line pliers to have a handle spring. So if I insert my round nose in there and let it go, that spring tension opens up my joint slightly so I can slide a piece of solder in there. So I'm going to grab a piece of solder, let it go. Now my solder is in between the two. I'm going to straighten this out a little bit just so it's nice and even in there. But now my solder is between my two jump rings. Now I'll show you how I set this up in a third hand to act as a little bit of a heat sink to protect the rock. Okay, we got our third hand here. I'm going to position my piece so that this guy's holding on to the rock right at the bottom of the jump ring, so my jump ring is upright, just like that. Now I'm going to add a little bit of flux. And then I'm going to take my torch, and when I do this, I'm going to direct my heat this way and then this way, focusing my heat on that joint. I want to heat it up, but I don't want to heat anything one side too much, otherwise my solder will flow that side. The nice part about having it right in the center though is that when my solder flows, typically it'll flow right in the center of that joint. So let's get this going. There you go. Done. Now that rock's going to be maybe a little hot. It's not. I can actually hold it in my hand. So my heat control was good, and now we I'm going to quench that jump ring on there just because I don't want it to stay hot. So I'll quench it, and then we'll grab our parallel jaw pliers, squeeze it, and we're done with this project. Okay, so we are quenched. I'm going to find my solder joint, which is right here. I'm going to rotate it to the inside of the rock. I'm going to take my parallel jaw pliers, and I'm going to squeeze that jump ring oval. And now I have an oval bail for this pendant. I fibbed a little bit. The last part's obviously to clean up your pieces. Get all that heat stuff off. So the last bit of piece of thing I'm going to do to this guy is throw him in the ultrasonic cleaner to kind of get any of the buffing compound out of the little bits and joints. And then once that's done, I'll make a little video of what it looks like when it gets done, a little montage. And then if you guys have any other questions about this technique, let me know, reach out, make a comment. And if you've learned this technique a different way, cool. This is just the way that I've decided that I wanted to try and teach myself. I've never taken a class on how to do this. I had an idea when I saw these beach rocks when we went on a little family vacation that I wanted to do this, and then I just worked through the process. The first one I made, I definitely went to school on. I learned some things. The second one, I learned some things, and then this third one is something new as well. I did it with the Montana agate with the sapphire set in it. I plan on doing it with an antler. I plan on doing it with wood. Just test the technique out, see what you think. And if you get it wrong the first time, smile and think to yourself, okay, I'm not going to do that particular thing again. I'll try it a different way, or I'll learn, or I'll hone my hand-eye coordination a little bit more. All this does is gives you a little bit more experience to be able to get where you're at, to get where you want to be, and then achieve the goals that you want in your own business. So have ideas, experiment, don't be afraid to fail. Yeah, if you have questions, always reach out. I'm here. Check out linepunchforge.com if you're looking for any kind of jewelry tools, stones, that kind of thing. I have some budget stones and definitely some faceted stones if you're looking for that kind of thing. So check out linepunchforge.com, and we'll see you in the next video.